Hi, everyone. This is Steve Delisad, and welcome to this week's edition of CEOs You Should Know. I'm thrilled to be joined by Jessica Reid Sliwerski, the CEO and co-founder of Ignite Reading. Jessica, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
We're excited to jump in to learn more about you and more about the organization. So why don't we kick it off? I know looking at your background, at one point you were an assistant principal, you were a literary specialist, you were a nonprofit CEO and an ed tech founder. What moments in your career really shaped your belief that every child can learn to read?
So I started as a classroom teacher and initially did not know how to teach my students how to read. And it wasn't until my third year of teaching that I learned how to teach my kids to read. And I very quickly saw how easy it was to teach them to read. And that ignited something in me around wanting to ensure that every single child has the opportunity to learn to read. If I could learn how to teach my kids to read as a baby teacher in my third year of teaching, which by the way is too late because I should have known how to teach them to read the minute I stepped
Walked
into
in a
the
classroom,
classroom. But even still, being early in my journey, learning to teach them to read and being in a classroom in Harlem where 100% of my students were Black and brown children. They were receiving free and reduced lunch. Many of them, English was not their first language. And all of them learned to read. And that set the bar for me around what's possible for kids. It ignited in me a desire to want to help as many children as possible learn to read. And I carried with me that experience of having seen what's possible for children and knowing that it's possible, and then beginning to work across schools and school systems and in partnership with them also help move their children to learn to read. So when you see what's possible, you can't unsee that.
That's awesome. What an inspiring journey and background there. I know that also you're a cancer survivor. Congratulations. Obviously,
Thank
love to
you.
hear that. And an author of Cancer Hates Kisses. How has that personal journey really influenced the way that you've developed and built that mission-based organization?
So when you go through a crucible in your life, like cancer or some other incredibly difficult time,
Mm-hmm.
you can emerge with a sense of just how strong you actually are. My therapist called this at one point post traumatic growth, which I thought was really
Yeah.
interesting. She said there are some people who, when they go through hard things, they just get so completely beaten down and they can't really cope and they struggle to move on from it. And then there are other people who life throws a curveball and you go through that trauma and yet you emerge from it even stronger and with a deeper sense of purpose. And she said, and that's what you've done. And because of that experience and learning how strong I am, I have this belief in myself and this confidence that I can do hard things. Um, I get emotional because I still have so much trauma around that experience. I had just had my daughter. She was only 3 months old.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't have a history of cancer. I was told by doctors that I was basically imagining it and that I was fine. And I kept advocating for myself, and thank goodness I did because that tumor unchecked would have killed me. But to have just had a baby, to have no history, and then to suddenly be thrown into all of the things that are part of breast cancer treatment. I had a double mastectomy. I had 3 months of chemotherapy. I had 5 months of hormone therapy. There's just all of this stuff
Mm-hmm.
that goes along with cancer. And yet I survived and I emerged stronger than I ever was before. And so, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a parent, as a human, anytime life throws something hard at me, you're a parent, something hard comes up every
Absolutely.
day. And in my work as a CEO, all day, every day, there are hard things. And yet I know I can do hard things. If I can beat cancer, if I can amputate my breasts and go through multiple surgeries and lose all of my hair in chemotherapy and survive, well, I can do that negotiation. I can do that feedback conversation. I can do that board meeting or any of the other myriad hard things that are part of showing up and leading a company every day and fighting for what kids deserve.
Well, first of all, very happy to hear that you beat it and that you move forward. And thank you for being so real and raw with us on that experience too. But it's definitely obviously very inspiring. And to your point, obviously to be able to come out of that, nothing seems like a bit of a challenge anymore. So that's a great lesson for everybody that's tuning in. I know that before you found Ignite Reading, you were also the CEO of Open Up Resources, a national nonprofit that was focused on educational equality, right? What did that experience teach you, really about like scaling that impact in education?
So I never set out to be a CEO. Let me start there. So I guess the first thing it taught me is that I could be a CEO.
There you go.
I Going back to your earlier question where I was talking about being a classroom teacher and just something sparking around the incredible serotonin overflow and emotional gratification that came from teaching kids to read and just wanting to do more and more and more of that.
What grade did you teach?
I started as a fifth grade teacher my
Okay.
first 2 years, and then I moved down to first grade, which was kind of terrifying because I was like, these are babies and they still
More
wet their
even,
pants
yeah.
sometimes and they forget they're at school and they call you mommy. And then I just fell in love with the first graders, and now that's officially, don't tell any of the kids I've previously taught, but that is my favorite grade. And someday I actually hope that when I am an old lady who is technically retired, that I can just volunteer all day as a first grade teacher again.
That's awesome.
Um, but when I moved into different levels of leadership, because I kept getting tapped for opportunities and I'm a yes girl, so I'm just like, oh, I've never done that before. Okay. And then one of those opportunities became
CEO.
being the CEO of Open Up Resources, this national nonprofit. And it was really cool to get to scale across the country these high quality curricula. And we had both mathematics and literacy in our portfolio. And my passion is literacy. And I fell in love in particular with one of the programs. And in the meantime, at home, I'm raising my daughter and she's approaching the age of 5, which developmentally is the right time to formally begin teaching our kids to read.
Mhm.
And I reached out to one of the curriculum writers that we were working with, who's also a reading researcher. Her name's Dr. Sharon Walpole. And I was like, hey, Sharon, it's been a minute since I've been in the classroom. I love your curriculum so much, and I want to use it to teach Penelope to read because her school's not teaching her. So I start teaching her to read, and sidebar, it is way more pleasurable to teach other people's children to read than it is to teach your own child. And to this day, Penelope will say things like, Mama, remember when you were teaching me to read? Wasn't that so fun? And I'm like, no, it was
We remember
not.
the same time.
Yeah, what are you remembering? Anyway, she clearly remembers the joy of actually cracking the code and learning to read, not the ways that she tortured me, but maybe that's what she enjoys about the memory, that she really tortured me. Anyway, so I start working with her, and that's when I realized, like, oh my gosh, I am perpetuating the shadow system in education. I am giving my child what I can as a parent who is more resourced, in this instance, resourced in terms of knowledge and how to. And there are kids sitting in her classroom in her school district, who are not being taught to read. And that made me really mad. And that's when I, inadvertently started tinkering with this concept of trying to figure out a way to make tutoring more equitable
Mm-hmm.
to ensure kids learn to read. So I guess, one of the biggest things I learned at Open Up Resources was how to be a CEO, because I had the chance to step into that role, that I liked being a CEO, even though it is so hard. I got to experience the taste of national scale and impact. And I was also learning what wasn't working in the realm of K-12 curriculum, and that there was a need for something else, and that something else being this level of one-on-one instruction and this opportunity for tutoring if we're going to create a safety net that ensures that all kids learn to read.
That's awesome. So let's talk about Ignite Reading. So Ignite Reading focuses on high dosage, evidence based tutoring. What makes the model different than past solutions?
So, oftentimes when we hear tutoring, we think outside of the school day,
Mm-hmm.
separate from school. And we probably also imagine tutoring as what most of us know, which is okay, parent picks a child up from school and brings them to some other place to receive that tutoring. And what's different about Ignite Reading is that we are leveling the playing field, and we are ensuring that every single child who is at risk of not learning to read on time, and by the way, learning to read on time means kids are learning to read before they leave first grade. So that's important in
Makes
all
sense.
of this, because a lot of people think it's grade 3. Grade 3 is too late. And I wanted to level the playing field to ensure that all kids can have access to tutoring. Tutoring is really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if there's one thing that public education should do above all else, it is make sure that kids learn to read. Because how can you do anything
Anything
else?
else?
You
Can't
can't
learn anything
even
else. Yeah.
do math problems starting in second grade if you can't read. So we are different in that we're not after school. We are embedded during the school day. Specifically, we are embedded as part of that literacy ecosystem within a school. It is 15 minutes a day. It is one-on-one. It is virtual, but it is with a live, real human. So here's
Very
what it
cool.
looks like. Classroom teacher does their whole class lesson. Then the kids who are getting the Ignite Reading intervention grab their Chromebooks or iPads, they put on their cute headphones, they click a button, boom, on their screen is their tutor. And they see their tutors as their tutor. Most kids, if you're like, what's the name of your tutor? They say, my tutor. Because they're building this relationship with them. They see them every day, and that person is teaching them how to read. So that in and of itself is very different. We're also different in how maniacal we are about training our tutors. So I told you that I didn't know how to teach reading when I stepped into the classroom. So one of the things that we do with our tutors is we are putting them through almost 100 hours of paid professional learning as part of an upfront certification before they are then working with kids.
It's great.
So they are expert reading instructors when they're working with students. And then we're not leaving anything to chance. We're doing ongoing performance management and accountability. And that kind of development and investment in our tutor corps is what's ensuring that the quality of instruction each child gets every day is nothing less than superb. And that is what's leading to these incredible outcomes we're seeing.
That's awesome. Speaking of incredible outcomes, I know that a Johns Hopkins study found that 85% of proficient students maintain their success through second grade without further intervention. As a founder, What did it mean to see that validation?
Oh my gosh. It meant everything because is the proof that I needed somebody else to stamp, because I already knew
Mm-hmm.
that that was true, right? I'm a lifelong educator. I taught kids to
It's
read
that
on
validation.
time in
Yeah.
first grade. I saw that when they learned to read on time in first grade, when they moved to second grade to the classroom next door, they were still reading,
Yep.
right? When you are taught the correct way to read, and we can get a child to the point of automaticity, meaning they can look at the word um, heart and not have to try to decode it, but they just know it, right? It's mapped to the brain. It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to disappear.
Yep.
So it is incredibly validating, and it makes me so proud because we are working directly with schools, directly with kids. And I want to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that what we are doing is working and that it's working at scale, because there are millions of babies who need this intervention right now. So to have that validation from Johns Hopkins University researchers saying, not only does this program work, it works at scale, and the outcomes are durable. The kids who got the intervention in first grade, who made it to benchmark by the end of first grade, were still largely on benchmark at the end of second grade without further intervention. That has massive implications for the urgency to teach kids to read on time,
Sure.
for school district budgets, and for eliminating a crisis in our country that should not be a crisis.
Yeah.
It is criminal that only about 30% of our fourth graders in our nation are proficient readers.
It's crazy.
3 out of 10 kids.
That is crazy.
And it doesn't just like
Bother anyone.
magically
Yeah.
fix itself when they become fifth graders, eighth graders, high
Wild.
schoolers, adults.
Yeah, that's a wild stat. Let's stick to the first grade. I know research calls it the first grade window, right? And it's that make or break year, as you mentioned, for reading and for literacy. How do you feel that schools should like listen to that research and reshape the way that they're conducting it? And what should policymakers really think about this early education?
So, first grade is the opportunity to provide a just in time intervention. And there is a lot happening right now. You might have even heard this, having, a 5-year-old daughter who's in school and embarking on her journey of learning to read. This phrase, science of reading.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a tidal wave of momentum around the science of reading in the policy space and in K-12 school systems. For those who don't know, science of reading is essentially a body of research around how the brain learns to read. Why does that matter? Well, for decades, educators completely ignored that research and instead just thought if they put beautiful books in front of kids, that kids would magically learn to read. I am not making this up.
It's crazy.
And now we're like, no. Kids have to be explicitly taught. The brain has to be wired such that kids can automatically read words. Then they can fluently read sentences, which is the bridge to comprehension. So, first grade is crucial because in first grade, the bulk of the code is being taught. In kindergarten, kids need to be learning letter names and letter sounds. And then they need to learn the most basic part of the code, which is how to put those letter names and sounds together to read consonant, vowel, consonant words like the word cat or the word sit, okay? And then they would also be learning a smattering of what we call high frequency words, words that show up frequently in texts like I, and, a, the. And I see you nodding because I am sure those are the
Just did a
things that
ton
you're
last
seeing
night, yeah.
Mila working on.
Yeah.
Okay. When you enter first grade, you need those skills under your belt. And many children enter first grade and they still don't have those skills. Meanwhile, In first grade, you then have to learn more complex pieces of the code.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn things like the letter S, which you were previously taught goes S, and the letter H, which you were previously taught goes H, come together to make SH, which goes sh. That's kind of mind-blowing, right? If you're a
Mm-hmm.
little kid.
Yeah.
And that's a lot for your little brain to hold on to. Meanwhile, you then have to start building working memory to add on all these other sounds as you move through the code. And the code keeps building through first grade. And we're just talking single syllable words. We're not even getting into multisyllabic words. And they've got to master all of that to the point of automaticity so that they end first grade on benchmark and can start second grade ready to do multisyllabic decoding, ready to read independently and be building knowledge. And for too long, we have had rhetoric nationally of read by grade 3. And where that really stems from is the fact that in third grade, you have an accountability test. But here's the disconnect. The accountability test in third grade is a comprehension text. You can't comprehend if you can't even read the words.
Yeah.
If your brain has to spend all of its energy just trying to decode words in a sentence, you have nothing left to try to understand what those words mean.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have to be focused on, what we have to be urgent about, the narrative we have to change is this reading by grade 3. What I am beating the drum around is something I call the first grade promise. And I'm trying to galvanize school systems around this vision of getting at least 85% of our babies to benchmark before they leave first grade so that they can do the work in second grade of rich reading and knowledge building so that they can actually sit and pass a test in third grade and demonstrate that they are truly proficient readers.
That's awesome. I know one of the things we talked about earlier was that individualized tutor, right? The virtual tutor. How do you feel that technology and the human connection could work together to really solve that national crisis that we have right now with literacy?
There are limitless opportunities when we combine the power of technology and human connection, especially when we're talking about teaching young children. There's so much hype right now about AI.
So much.
So much.
Yeah.
And especially in education, a lot of that hype is turning into fear. And in the spaces that I'm in and visiting schools and engaging with system leaders and teachers, it's just like, oh my gosh, AI is coming for our jobs. And I don't believe that. And I think fear is a distraction from the real opportunity here, which is how do we leverage AI and technology to optimize the human in the loop? So with what we're doing with Ignite Reading, we are thinking so much about this precious one-on-one human connection that kids have with their tutors, that even though it's through a screen, the relationships that they are building are so profound. I mean, the kids are crying when it's time for, right now we're on February break in a lot of schools. When it's time for February break, kids are crying because they're not going to see their tutors for a week. And then when they come back, they are like running down the hallway when it's time for Ignite Reading because they get to see their tutor, Steve, who knows that it's their sister's quinceañera or that they just lost a tooth or that they have a brand new pet turtle. And Steve is teaching them to read words and read sentences, and that feels good.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't want to lose that human connection. And also, I want that human in the loop to be absolutely stellar at teaching that child to read and making sure that they are teaching into that child's precise gaps and then aggressively moving them along that continuum to proficiency. And that's where behind the scenes, all of the tech that we're building can leverage AI so that tutor every single day is nothing less than the absolute best,
Hmm.
because that's what kids deserve.
Absolutely. As a parent, everything you're saying is amazing, right? And from outside in, it looks like everything that Ignite Reading is incredible. But I'm sure there's been challenges behind the scenes or obstacles that you've had to face. What have been some of those biggest challenges or biggest obstacles that you faced while getting this up and going?
So it's been really interesting to build a company from the ground up and watch it grow so quickly. So, Ignite Reading is the first company where I am co founder and CEO, and it's been built with my vision
It's awesome.
of, thank you, a world where all of our kids learn to read on time. And that's very different from my past executive roles and my last CEO role, where I was kind of like along for the ride, but it
Sure.
was someone else's baby.
Yeah, this is your vision. This is your
Yeah,
baby. Yeah.
it is my baby,
Yeah.
and that's the metaphor I constantly think about. It's when you first have a baby and you keep staring at your baby and you're just like, "Oh my god, I made a baby. I made a human." And you can't get
Yeah.
over that because it's so
You're like,
surreal.
they're perfect.
They're
Yeah.
perfect even though they look like a little
Yeah.
alien. And then you keep watching this baby grow,
Yeah.
and you're so in awe of it because it's its own person, even
Hmm.
though you're the parent. And then you have to let other people help take care of your baby, whether that's a babysitter, a nanny, your parents, your in laws, the preschool, the school. And that's kind of freaky, right? You're
Hmm.
like, oh my God, this is my baby, but I'm going to let you take care of it. And it's a lot like that with a company and with building this company. I am still starstruck, I guess, and in awe of the fact that I had this baby Ignite Reading. I have to like pinch myself every time I walk into a school and I see kids doing the program with big smiles on their face and reading sentences, and a teacher is saying, I could not do my job without Ignite Reading. Or they're saying, this student, Gabriella, she started the program and she did not know the alphabet. And now look at her read that paragraph. And it's only been 7 months. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that's a wild feeling. It's a wild feeling to be like, this idea is a real thing in real life, literally changing kids' lives.
Hmm.
And then there's everything behind the curtain with just how hard it is to build a company. It is so hard. And I think it's also really hard when you care so much.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm like, maybe if I didn't care so much, this wouldn't be so hard, but I don't know how to not care so much.
Hmm.
And it went from, you know, a small little team of people. I remember when it was two of us doing this. I remember when it was eight of us. And now I have 150 full-time employees. I have, um, you know, 1,500 tutors spread
It's
out across
amazing.
the country. And one of the things that I think is hardest for me, because I'm such a people person, I love the details of the work, the guts of the work. I want to be involved in all the things to make sure that it's like going to be the best possible experience for our kids and our teachers and our tutors, and we now have different layers of employees, and I show up in a space and I'm just like, I'm just Jess. Like, I'm just teacher girl Jess who wants to nerd out about early literacy and how to make this program better. But to a bunch of other people in the room, I'm CEO Jess and I'm scary.
That makes sense.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that's like kind of a weird thing that I have to constantly grapple with and get used to. Uh, the other thing is, I think a lot about culture. We're a fully virtual company, and what it means to have a large staff, to be entirely
Mhm.
virtual, doing many of our meetings on Zoom, and to continue to pour into this really precious culture that we've built where there is psychological safety, where people feel seen, where people feel cared for, where we have very ambitious goals and expectations around what we're trying to achieve, and we are kind. No one's allowed to be in our company if they are a jerk. You
Yep.
could be the
It's
smartest
a great
person in the
role.
world, but if you're a jerk,
It's a
you
great
don't get to
role.
be here, right? And it is a lot of work to build a culture like that and to maintain a culture like that as the company grows. And then the last thing I'll share is something that I've recently been grappling with. Um, I have struggled with depression and anxiety since middle school. I have a very harsh inner voice. And in some ways, all of these things have served me in terms of my achievements. It's
Hmm.
like, yay, look at what I did. People oftentimes are like, how old are you? You've done all of these things. How do you do that? And it's like, well, because I drive myself crazy. Um, and this past fall, I hit a wall. I'd been building the company for 5 years
Hmm.
and thinking that I could be superhuman and not sleep, not eat enough because I'm just going from like
On the
thing to
go
thing to thing to
nonstop.
thing to
Yeah.
thing nonstop. Um, not pour into relationships, um, not go to yoga. I would ride my Peloton still because it's right next to my desk, so
Hmm.
that was easy. But like I was not taking care of myself. And then as a result, after going 5 years this way, I was so dysregulated that then as all the things that come at a CEO all day, every day were coming at me, I literally couldn't think. Like my brain just stopped working. Which then when you are someone who is used to being quick on their feet and a high performer and your brain's like not functioning
Yeah.
and you're in my case I think layer on top of that I'm also a female CEO which brings like a whole new set of fun things to deal with. But then like imposter syndrome started coming at me really hard. Like, you're not the right person for this job. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to do this. Why are you doing this job? Maybe someone else should do this job. You don't have all the answers. You don't know how to fix things. Like, I was so below the line. I couldn't be curious. I couldn't show up and like collaborate well. And there was this one meeting I went to where I was just like such a hot mess in the meeting. And afterwards, one of my teammates who was in there with me called and was just like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "Yeah, I can tell. And you know what? We need you to be okay.
Yeah.
We are at this company because we believe in you. And you need to take care of yourself. So what do you need to do to take care of yourself?" And it was just this like huge wake up call to me.
That's great though.
And so I started taking care of myself, which was really hard because taking care of myself meant saying no to things.
Yeah.
It meant prioritizing going to yoga over banging out 10 more emails. And when you're someone who is obsessed with productivity, that is really hard.
Hmm.
But what I've been teaching myself and then seeing is, you know what? You can go to yoga And then you can come back and you can get a good night's sleep after a nutritious meal. And you can wake up in the morning and you can bang out those 10 emails faster, better, or maybe not at all, because maybe you don't actually need to do that right
Yeah.
now. You need to do this other thing. And so I have
You'll still be
found,
there.
yeah, I have found that I am happier, I am healthier, I can show up in spaces and I can be more thoughtful and curious and inspirational. And I
That's
can
great.
actually be the CEO my executive team needs, my company needs, and all of our partners need, and that this mission needs if I take care of myself.
100%. It's great advice for everybody tuning in. Before we wrap up, I do want to talk about the launch of the First Grade Promise and what bold step you took on day one and how anyone that's tuning in could actively join in making it a success.
I am so excited about this. I feel like, you know, that feeling, maybe you feel that in your role where you're like, everything I've done was ultimately to get me here to this point and this moment. And it's just crazy the way that all of those threads unexpectedly come
Came to
together.
this moment.
Yeah,
Nice.
to this magical moment. And that is how I feel about the First Grade Promise. The First Grade Promise is what I hope is going to become the next big movement in K 12 education. And not just for educators and
Sure.
system leaders, but also for policymakers, for parents, for community members. I want this in the water. I want everybody to have some notion of the First Grade Promise, which is a promise that we are going to do everything in our power to make sure kids learn to read on time, which is before they leave first grade. So that means ensuring teachers have the right curriculum, that teachers are trained, that tutoring is a safety net in place for the most vulnerable learners, and that we're using assessment and we're actually all holding ourselves accountable to see where kids start at the beginning of first grade and how they are moving towards proficiency and all of the different levers we have to pull to make sure that they're going to be proficient before they leave first grade. Because if we can do that, it can and it will fundamentally change everything else. And I deeply believe that so many of our other societal ills that we have stem from the fact that we are not teaching kids to read on time.
That's awesome. We learned a lot about you, about the organization, right? If there was something that you wanted everyone to know about the mission that we maybe did not have a chance to cover, what would that be?
First grade, first grade, first grade. Kids
Makes
can
sense.
learn to read, kids will learn to read, and kids must learn to read in first grade. And if you are inspired to join the First Grade Promise, you can go to our website, ignite-reading.com, and you can take the pledge to be part of the First Grade Promise.
That's awesome. And if someone tuning in wanted to learn more, maybe they're a parent that's tuning in that wants to learn more about Ignite Reading or yourself, what steps should they take?
They should absolutely go to our website. It is loaded with information, including lots of informative blogs that are all about reading. So parents who want to be nerdy like you, I feel like
Check
you're
it
going to go
out.
there, Steve.
Yeah.
Can definitely go there. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I am constantly posting information about First Grade Promise and early literacy. And that is Jessica Reid, Reid, Sliwerski, it's spelled phonetically, on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for telling us about your background, your personal background, your obviously your work background as well, and learning so much more about Ignite Reading and the overall industry.
Thank you, Steve. This was so fun.
It was awesome. And thank you all for tuning in for this week's edition. Tune in next week for next week's edition of CEOs You Should Know.